What's good, guys? I'm Zayas, and today I'm a review Fire Punch by Fujimoto Tatsuki. I haven't uploaded recently, and if you want to know the reason why, I'll talk about it at the end of this video. But for now, let's just get into the review. Fire Punch was pretty popular and relatively successful, especially when you consider that this is Fujimoto's first serialized work. This led into his next serialized work, Chainsaw Man, which I'm sure many of you know as it's one of the most popular manga of this generation. Not only did I think Chainsaw Man was much better than Fire Punch, I think his one shots Look Back and Sayonara Eri were vast improvements over even that, being some of the better one shots that I've personally read in my entire life, which is pretty impressive. And I think the backgrounds being much improved, the paneling being a lot more creative and repetitive, and a lot of just storytelling details in general that were better in those one shots just really added up to make them feel a lot more alive. If those weren't enough credentials for you, there's also the fact that three of his assistants went on to make successful serialized works of their own, including Jigoku Kuraku, Spy X Family, and Dandadan. Even though I don't think Fire Punch lives up to his later works, I think there's still parts of Fire Punch which are easy to enjoy. You can feel how eccentric Fujimoto is right away, talking about themes and ideas that a lot of authors usually don't deal with. Alongside his eccentricism, there was also some pretty great artwork, especially when it came to the action scenes. I wouldn't say this artwork is so good it's worth reading the series alone for the artwork, but it fits the series quite well. Although I could say that the backgrounds and the paneling could use a little work, and they were vastly improved in later series like Chainsaw Man and Look Back. The action scenes, like I said before, are very powerful. There is an element of messiness in the artwork, but I feel as if it fits the chaos and all the craziness that's happening in the world quite well. It seems as if it was meant to be intentionally messy to some degree. And on top of that, the expressions in this work were done pretty well, especially the ones depicting more negative emotions like pain looks or looks of sadness. You can really feel when these characters are going through a lot of trauma. But on the flip side, he doesn't depict scenes of happiness quite as well. You could say this is because not many characters in this series were really happy to begin with, but it does seem a little unnatural when they try to put on a smile. When it comes to the story itself, I'm not quite as big of a fan. The first part of the story starts off with a very standard revenge plot, and while I don't mind simple ideas done really well, I would say that this revenge story isn't executed that great. For the most part, it was just a story about this burning Avenger getting revenge on a misguided fool. And it really didn't get me at any point to root for either of these characters, especially not Agni, knowing that him getting revenge would result in absolutely nothing. Because how weird the rest of the series was, I was expecting that the plot line would be equally as weird and there would be some giant twist throughout the entire story. But that twist never really came. It just remained a standard revenge story until the arc was concluded. After the revenge arc concluded was when I found the series to get really shaky. There was no real direction or aim of the story. It was mostly just wanderless aiming, resulting in a pretty meaningless conclusion, which I did not enjoy myself. And with the topic of the ending, I do have to bring up nihilism, as there is a ton of nihilism in Fire Punch, especially in the ending, as the ending is trying to show us that no matter what happened during the series, Agni suffering, Tagata seeking a way to die, and all the events that happened in the story, it ultimately didn't matter, and the universe was reduced to atoms. Now, I personally don't really support nihilism, meaning maybe I dislike this more than most because of that. But on top of that, I don't think it makes for a really good story to just be like, no matter what happened in my story, none of this ultimately matters. Like, obviously, it matters to us. That's why we're reading it. The characters are sort of a mixed bag in Fire Punch. On one hand, I think Agni and Tagata are great characters with great development. But on the other hand, I feel as if there's no other characters which managed to even leave an impact on me, and I probably couldn't remember any of their names. A lot of this isn't because they're bad characters. Usually, characters are just criminally underdeveloped and they get no real screen time. Characters are in and out of Fire Punch in a flash. They'll be here for 5, maybe 10, max 20 chapters, aside from Tagata and Agni, like I mentioned. Agni starts out as a very standard revenge protagonist who's seeking to kill the man who slaughtered his entire village. But as we move along in the story, he grows a little bit more and becomes a more interesting character. Fujimoto is also very self aware about this, and he pokes a lot of fun at himself and just revenge stories in general, with things like Tagata filming Agni, and he just likes to break the fourth dimension quite a bit during this series. Again, this revenge plot really doesn't do anything too special. It's very simple and basic, but if you like that kind of stuff where Agni just gets really angry and punches the antagonist and the antagonist dies, then you might enjoy Fire Punch. I can appreciate the action scenes, I can feel the anger coming off, but I personally don't like a series that's that dumbed down and would appreciate a little more nuanced characters. When Agni realizes that getting revenge against this guy will accomplish literally nothing, it's again a very standard thing that happens in revenge plots. But I would say the more interesting part of Agni's character comes after this has all happened. After he decides on not getting revenge, his mind goes blank and he does it anyways. Past this, he's really unsure on how to attain happiness. He'll try to pretend that he's somebody that he's not in order to be a little bit more happy. He'll pretend he's some sort of hero getting revenge so that he doesn't feel as bad about killing people. He'll pretend that he's dating someone who's actually someone else just so he can feel a little bit better about himself. Up until this point of the story, Agni has basically been doing what he's been told to do by other people. But it was in this panel right here that I felt like Agni sort of realized that he would never really be happy just living his life for other people. For me, this was pretty profound and one of the deeper moments in Agni's character development. If this sort of development had happened earlier on in the series, I would have enjoyed Fire Punch a lot more, but by now the story was really falling apart. There was no real objective or aim. It was just whatever goes, pretty spontaneous type stuff. Tagata was the other character which stuck with me. She was a very eccentric, bold, quick witted, spontaneous, funny character that I just loved all around. Oh, yeah, earlier I mentioned that Fujimoto was pretty eccentric with this one, and you can link that to a number of things. You can talk about the taboo topics he talks about, like incest, like cannibalism, and stuff like that. You can talk about the weird placement of movies in this series, where movies are a very big topic and a huge important part of this series. There's things like explosions, also that he's a really big fan of. It just inserts everywhere, and you can see that later on in his works as well. The theme of movies is shown with Tagata pretty well. She's a very deep connection with movies, and a lot of her character is likely to her going crazy after having lived for so long and having regeneration powers forever. The downsides of having regeneration is shown in Tagata pretty well, both mentally and physically. It's kind of Fujimoto going like, is being immortal really that great? And I would agree with him. I wouldn't want to be immortal because you'd probably go insane like Tagata did. Sadly, Tagata's gone after about 20 to 30 chapters, and this does sort of hurt the series for me because afterwards, Agni is the only real important character with any development left in this series, and you can't really go for like 50 chapters with only one character that anybody cares about. The ending in particular, like I mentioned before, was really the worst part of the series, and everything leading up to the ending as well. It was so open ended. There was nothing really to live for. It was just a bunch of aimless wandering, aimless living, and I just could not enjoy this ending, and it made me question how much I really like this series. Also, a lot of times in Fire Punch, it's hard to look forward to the next chapter. I never felt as if this was a you can't drop this, like I gotta read the next chapter. It was more like if I just stopped reading right now, I would be pretty satisfied. And that's probably not where you want your series to be. There were a lot of parts of Fire Punch I really enjoyed, and there were a lot of parts about Fire Punch which I couldn't get behind. And it's quite sad because this series to me clearly has a ton of potential in terms of artwork and just the crazy ideas that Fujimoto puts into his manga, but it just didn't come together in a cohesive way for me. I'm feeling like a strong 5 to a light 6. As to why I haven't been uploading recently, there's just been a lot of unexpected things happening one after the other. At first, it was just me taking a little bit longer to review Fire Punch than normal. It was like a week or something. And then all of a sudden, something unexpected happens. You have to take a few days off. And then I went on vacation. There was a vacation I planned for. And then all of a sudden, something else happens. And now I got to do something else. And I'm just busy all the time. And then there's another event happening. And just it just gets a little crazy sometimes. So now I think I'll be able to upload again. Hopefully, I'll try to aim for at least once a week, but I'll try to do more if it's possible. So thanks everyone who stuck around, and there's even more people who joined. And if you joined during then, thank you. And yeah, just subscribe, like everything. I'll see you guys in the next one.